Wyoming Territory. Spring, 1894. There were two kinds of stories that traveled quickly across a frontier town. The true ones. And the ones people wanted to believe. By the time the stagecoach reached Red Ridge, nearly everyone had already decided what kind of woman Mei Lin Zhao must be. Some said she was desperate. Others claimed she had sold herself for comfort. A few whispered she would inherit an old man's ranch before winter ever arrived. No one asked what had brought her there. No one wondered what she had lost. They only saw a young Chinese woman stepping off a dusty coach with one small suitcase and a future she had never chosen. Mei Lin lowered her eyes as curious faces followed every step she took across the wooden platform. She had learned long ago that silence often attracted less attention than explanations. At 23, she had already buried both parents. Her father's gambling debts had swallowed the family's laundry business, their home, and nearly every possession they owned. When the creditors finally stopped knocking, there was nothing left for them to take. Except her future. A church mission in San Francisco had offered one final opportunity. A widowed rancher in Wyoming was looking for a wife. Not a servant. Not a housekeeper. A wife. His name was Samuel Whitaker. He was 71 years old. The words alone had frightened Mei Lin. She imagined an angry old man living in a crumbling cabin, expecting obedience in exchange for food and shelter. But poverty had a way of shrinking every choice until only one remained. So she signed the papers. Not because she hoped for happiness. Because she hoped to survive. Outside the station, an elderly rancher waited beside a sturdy gray horse. He stood tall despite his age. His silver beard was neatly trimmed. Deep lines crossed his weathered face, yet his blue eyes held a calm kindness that surprised her immediately. When she approached, he removed his hat. "You must be Miss Zhao." His voice was steady and gentle. She nodded. "And you're Mr. Whitaker." He smiled. "I suppose, after today, you'll have to call me Samuel." For the first time in weeks, Mei Lin almost smiled. Almost. Samuel picked up her suitcase before she could stop him. "The horse can carry this easier than either of us. You don't have to." "I know." He looked at her kindly. "But I'd like to." The simple gesture caught her off guard. No one had carried anything for her in years. The wedding took place that afternoon beneath the shade of an old cottonwood tree beside the town church. There were no musicians. No elaborate decorations. Only Pastor Ellis, 2 witnesses, and a handful of curious townspeople pretending not to stare. As Samuel repeated his vows, he never once tightened his grip on Mei Lin's hands. He never demanded affection. Never forced a smile. When the ceremony ended, he quietly stepped back, giving her space instead of claiming it. The difference did not go unnoticed. Neither did the whispers. "Poor girl. She's young enough to be his granddaughter. She's only waiting for his money." Mei Lin heard every word. Samuel did too. Yet neither responded. They simply climbed into the wagon and began the long journey toward the ranch. The road wound through rolling grasslands before climbing into the foothills west of town. Snow still rested on the distant peaks, while wildflowers painted the valley in soft shades of blue and yellow. For nearly an hour, only the wagon wheels disturbed the silence. Finally, Samuel spoke. "I imagine you're nervous." She considered denying it. Instead, she answered honestly. "I don't know what to expect." "I'm glad." She looked at him. "If expectations get too high, life usually disappoints us." He chuckled softly. "I found the opposite can also be true." She wasn't sure what he meant. The ranch appeared just before sunset. It was far larger than she had imagined. A wide log house overlooked green pastures where dozens of horses grazed peacefully. A red barn stood beyond a winding creek. Smoke drifted gently from the stone chimney. The place felt alive. Not lonely. Samuel climbed down first. Welcome home. The words lingered in the cool evening air. Home. She had almost forgotten how that word sounded. Inside, the cabin smelled of fresh bread and cedar wood. Everything was neat. Everything had been prepared before her arrival. Samuel carried her suitcase down a short hallway and stopped before a bedroom door. This room is yours. She blinked. My room? He handed her a small brass key. You'll have complete privacy. She stared at the key in confusion. Aren't we? She hesitated, unable to finish the sentence. He understood anyway. No. His answer was immediate. You've traveled across half the country. You've lost more than I can probably imagine. I won't ask anything of you until you feel this place is truly your home. She searched his face for hidden meaning. There wasn't any. Only sincerity. Over the next several days, Samuel never entered her room without knocking. He thanked her every time she prepared supper. He insisted they share meals as equals rather than across opposite ends of the table. When she offered to wash every dish alone, he rolled up his sleeves and quietly dried them beside her. None of it matched the stories she had imagined during the journey west. Still, something felt unusual. Every evening after supper, Samuel disappeared into his study for nearly 2 hours. The door always remained closed. When he emerged, his eyes were often red, as though he had been remembering something too painful to speak aloud. Every Sunday morning, he saddled his old horse before sunrise. He returned carrying fresh mountain flowers. Yet the flowers never stayed inside the house. One afternoon, curiosity finally overcame hesitation. Keeping a respectful distance, Mei Lin followed the narrow trail behind the barn. It ended at a small hillside cemetery. There, Samuel knelt before a single white headstone. He gently replaced the faded flowers with fresh ones before removing his hat. He stayed there a long time. Not speaking. Simply sitting in silence. Watching him from beneath the shade of an aspen tree, Mei Lin realized something she hadn't expected. The old rancher wasn't living with loneliness. He was living with love that had never truly left him. And whatever secret still weighed upon his heart. It had nothing to do with the young woman he had married. It had begun many years before she ever arrived in Wyoming. For several days after following Samuel to the small cemetery, Mei Lin never mentioned what she had seen. She sensed the old rancher would speak when he was ready. Until then, she respected the silence he seemed to carry like an old friend. Life at the ranch settled into an unexpected rhythm. Every morning began before sunrise. Samuel prepared coffee while she baked fresh bread. They worked side by side without ever rushing one another. She learned which horses preferred apples instead of carrots. She learned that the old windmill squeaked every time the western wind arrived before rain. She learned that Samuel greeted every sunrise by standing on the porch for a full minute, removing his hat before beginning the day's work. At first she assumed it was prayer. Eventually she realized. It was gratitude. One afternoon, while organizing supplies in the loft above the barn, Mei Lin noticed several dusty wooden crates tucked beneath old blankets. Curiosity drew her closer. Inside the first crate were dozens of carefully carved wooden toys. Tiny horses. Handmade dolls. A miniature wagon. Every piece had been sanded smooth by patient hands. The second crate held neatly folded children's quilts in every imaginable color. The third contained tiny boots, coats, mittens, and knitted scarves arranged according to size. Nothing had been thrown together. Everything had been preserved with extraordinary care. She climbed down from the loft carrying one of the small wooden horses. Samuel looked up from repairing a saddle. His expression changed the instant he saw the toy. For a brief moment, His smile disappeared. "I didn't know children lived here," Mei Lin said gently. "They did." His answer came almost as a whisper. "When?" "A long time ago." She waited. He said nothing more. That evening, the little wooden horse remained on the kitchen table between them. Neither mentioned it again. As spring slowly gave way to early summer, people from neighboring ranches began stopping by more often. Some delivered eggs. Others traded vegetables or supplies. Nearly everyone greeted Samuel with genuine affection. One elderly woman embraced him without warning. "It's good seeing your porch lit again." Samuel smiled. "It has been too quiet." The woman turned toward Mei Lin. "My dear. You've brought life back to this place." Mei Lin thanked her politely. After the visitors left, she finally asked, "Everyone speaks as though this ranch used to be very different." Samuel stared out the window. It was. What happened? He looked toward the cemetery beyond the cottonwood trees. Life happened. Again. Nothing more. Several mornings later, Samuel insisted on repairing an old fence despite unusually hot weather. Mei Lin noticed his breathing had become heavier during the walk across the pasture. "You should rest." "I've rested enough in my lifetime." He laughed softly. "Besides, those cattle won't respect an old man who sleeps all afternoon." She smiled despite herself. Half an hour later. The hammer slipped from his hand. Samuel staggered. Then collapsed onto one knee. "Samuel." She reached him before he hit the ground completely. His face had turned pale. His breathing came in painful, shallow gasps. Within an hour, Dr. Benjamin Carter arrived from Red Ridge. The examination lasted only minutes. Outside the cabin, the doctor quietly removed his spectacles. "He doesn't know yet." Mei Lin's stomach tightened. "Know what?" "His heart. It's failing. Medicine can make him comfortable, but not cure him." "How long?" The doctor looked toward the mountains before answering. "Perhaps months. Perhaps less." Samuel already knew. She realized that the moment she stepped back inside. He wasn't frightened. He wasn't surprised. He simply poured 2 cups of tea as though nothing unusual had happened. "You spoke with Benjamin." She nodded. "He worries too much." "You don't?" Samuel smiled faintly. "When you reach 71, you stop measuring life by years. You start measuring it by whether you've finished what you came here to do." His words lingered in the quiet cabin. Finished. As though there were still one final task waiting. That night, rain tapped gently against the cabin roof. Samuel slowly stood from his chair and disappeared into the hallway. When he returned, he carried an old iron key attached to a faded leather cord. He placed it carefully in front of Mei Lin. "You've been wondering about the locked room." She looked toward the heavy oak door near his study. "I have. I've kept it closed for nearly 30 years. He pushed the key toward her. "I think it's finally time." Her hands trembled slightly as she crossed the hallway. The key turned with surprising ease. The hinges creaked softly. She expected darkness. Dust. Perhaps forgotten furniture. Instead, she stepped into an entirely different world. Bookshelves lined every wall. Hundreds of journals filled handmade cabinets. Boxes of carefully tied letters sat beneath the windows. Old photographs covered an entire table. Children. Dozens of them. Some smiling beside horses. Others holding books. Several standing proudly with Samuel and a beautiful woman whose warm smile filled every photograph. The same woman buried behind the barn. Mei Lin slowly picked up one framed picture. Nearly 20 children stood together outside the ranch house. Their clothing was worn. Yet every face shone with unmistakable joy. "Who are they?" Samuel walked beside her. "My family." She looked around the empty room. "I thought you said you never had children." "I didn't." He smiled sadly. "But life gave me many anyway." He began speaking. Not hurriedly. Not dramatically. Simply as one man finally laying down a burden he had carried for decades. 32 years earlier. He and his wife, Eleanor, had discovered 3 orphan siblings wandering through a snowstorm after losing both parents. They brought the children home. Fed them. Clothed them. Then another child arrived. And another. Before long, the ranch had quietly become a refuge for abandoned children no one else wanted. Some had lost parents to disease. Some to mining accidents. Some to railroad disasters. Others had simply been left behind. "We never advertised," Samuel said. "They somehow found us anyway." For more than 30 years. Children arrived. Children healed. Children grew. Then left to build lives of their own. Teachers. Doctors. Ranchers. Blacksmiths. Nurses. Store owners. Every journal recorded another life given a second chance. Every letter thanked the couple who had refused to let loneliness decide a child's future. Tears blurred Mei Lin's vision as she turned another page. One drawing showed a little girl holding Samuel's hand. Beneath it, in crooked handwriting, were 6 simple words. "Thank you for choosing me, Papa." Samuel looked away. Eleanor always said, "No child should feel unwanted." His voice cracked for the first time. When scarlet fever came, she cared for every sick child before thinking of herself. She saved nearly all of them. But he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Mei Lin understood. She gently closed the final journal. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" He smiled. "Kindness doesn't become more valuable because people applaud it." She wiped away a tear. Then, "Why did you marry me?" Samuel looked directly into her eyes. "Because this ranch is dying. The roof leaks. The barns need rebuilding. The money is almost gone. Speculators have offered to buy this land for years. I've refused every one of them." He reached for Eleanor's photograph. "They're only waiting for me to die." Mei Lin listened in silence. "I needed someone who understood loss. Someone who knew what it felt like to have nowhere left to go. I watched you the day you arrived. You thanked every person who showed you even the smallest kindness. You worked without complaint. You treated strangers with respect." He smiled warmly. "I didn't marry you because I wanted another wife. I married you because I believed you could become the guardian this place would someday need." Mei Lin felt tears roll freely down her cheeks. "You trusted someone you had never met." "I trusted the kind of heart I saw." Samuel gently placed the stack of journals into her hands. "Everything I own now belongs to you. But the ranch isn't the inheritance." He looked toward the photographs covering the room. "They are." Outside, children's laughter suddenly echoed across the yard. A wagon had arrived carrying 3 orphan siblings from a neighboring county. The oldest boy couldn't have been more than 12. The youngest little girl clutched a rag doll with frightened eyes. Samuel slowly stood, leaning heavily on his cane. Despite his failing heart, his face brightened with the same quiet joy Mei Lin had seen every sunrise. He turned toward her. "Come. There's still room for 3 more." At that moment, Mei Lin finally understood the greatest surprise waiting inside the old rancher's house. It had never been hidden behind a locked door. It had been hidden inside the heart of a man the world had mistaken for lonely. When, in truth, he had spent his entire life building a home for those who had nowhere else to belong.